Hey guys, it's Tim Miller from the Bulwark. We got fresh New York Times Siena polls out this weekend across the Sun Belt states, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. Directionally, good news for Kamala Harris as the polls continue to move her direction versus what they looked like a month or two ago before Joe Biden dropped out of the race. So let's just back up and take a look at these states one by one. Now remember, last week, the New York Times gave us their first look at the blue wall states in the upper Midwest, where Harris was winning among likely voters in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin by 4 points in each state. Among registered voters, Michigan didn't look quite as good. Now, across the Sun Belt, we've got numbers from 4 key states. I think it's important to remember the New York Times has been pretty bearish on the Democrats all year. It was one of Biden's worst polls. And so just using it as a baseline, I think it's important to kind of get a good sense for a realistic look at the race. Number one, Nate Cohn does a really good job over there. And number two, since it has been something that has been relatively pessimistic for Democrats, we know we're not looking at polls that are, going to be too bullish or too overconfident on Harris. So let's first look at the likely voter numbers. All right. Now, remember, this is how they will pull a whole group of people and then they'll judge, okay, well, who are the people that are actually most likely to vote? And that group is the one that pollsters mostly rely on. Then there's another number that looks at all of the people they polled, registered voters. So let's first look at the likely voter numbers. Harris has the biggest lead in Arizona, 50%. She hits the key 50% mark there with Trump at 45. She also has a lead in North Carolina. Nate Silver on this very YouTube said to us that North Carolina is the sleeper swing state. He thinks that people are underrating how good of a chance Harris has to flip North Carolina. She's up 2 in North Carolina in this poll among likely voters. Nevada down 1. We'll talk about Nevada a little more. That's the one that I'm the most bearish on. It's also the least important. It has the least number of electoral votes. And then Georgia down 4 with Trump at 50 in Georgia and Harris at 46. It's worth just really quick taking a look at the registered voter number as well. Both Arizona and North Carolina have Harris up 4. So the Harris number gets even bigger in North Carolina. In Nevada, Trump stays the same. In Georgia, the Trump number goes up to 7. So let's talk about this holistically about the 4 states, and then we'll go through each one at a time. I think the key trend that you see across the 4 states is Harris has basically regained all of the traditional Democratic voters that you would have expected Biden to have had, right? Like a big part of the fact that Democrats were trailing, that Trump was winning most of the year, was that the Democrats were doing worse, not among my people, not among former Republicans, not among these conservative swing voters that don't like Trump, Nikki Haley voters. The Democrats were doing worse among people that should be Democratic voters, young voters, Black and Hispanic men without college degrees. Those are the 2 key groups, but really across all of the groups, their numbers had been soft. That has, totally, maybe not totally, that has nearly totally come back to normal. So for one example, among Black voters across these states, Harris now with 84% of the vote, 11% for Trump, the remaining 5% for third parties or are not yet decided. That's still a little bit below Biden's 2020 number. Maybe it's a sign that she has more room to grow there. Maybe we don't really know at this point, but it's much better than where Biden was doing in the polls. Similarly, among Hispanic voters, if you look at Arizona and Nevada, the 2 states where they over-index, where there are enough Hispanic voters to really get a good sense of a good poll sample. Harris is at 54 to Trump's 40 among Hispanic voters. Again, a little bit lower than where Biden was. He was getting closer to 60 in 2020, but much better than where Biden was in the last New York Times Siena poll, where he was down at 47, where they were basically tied. So now she has a 14-point lead among Hispanics. Similarly, among young people, but this was the most interesting stat to me. Among people that say they get their news or that they use TikTok. All right, so this isn't just young people. I use TikTok. Some old people use TikTok. But Harris now has a 13-point advantage among TikTok users, which is disproportionately younger, skews younger, compared to Biden only had a 3-point edge among that same group back in May. So that's where you're seeing most of the movement. It is from these groups coalescing back to Harris. The RFK Jr. number, the third party number, all that is going down. Those folks are moving back to Harris. The other, I think, big picture thing where you look at the 4 states is her paths to victory now are plentiful. All right. We were looking earlier this year as really Biden needed a sweep among those blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And these 4 states that we're talking about right now all looked pretty bad. Now, let's say that, Harris does not do well in Pennsylvania. Let's say that Pennsylvania, Trump squeaks it out. Well, you can replace those votes by winning Arizona and North Carolina and still have this path to victory. Similarly, if you lose Wisconsin, you could replace Wisconsin with just Arizona. You could replace Michigan with North Carolina, right? Like they're just, it gives you a lot more pathways to victory if you don't win one of the 3 blue wall states. So I think that's the other important thing here, that these states are all in play now for the Democrats. Okay, let's go through them one at a time. Obviously, the most bullish state is Arizona, since she's winning by 5. I think this is great news. The Arizona thing was the most flummoxing for me most of the year. I spent a lot of time in Arizona last year during the midterms. Mark Kelly obviously wins over Blake Masters pretty handily. Katie Hobbs was a horrible candidate, a good person, but just didn't have good candidate skills. Going against Carrie Lake, she wins very narrowly. But so I'm going, how are Democrats going to backslide in Arizona if they won with Katie Hobbs, right? What is the problem here? The problem was basically the Hispanic voters that I mentioned earlier and these kind of suburban, never Trump Republican types in the Phoenix suburbs, right? And the Democrats were doing weak with both groups. This poll shows them improving with both groups. And I think that when we get to Georgia, the type of never Trumper is a little different in Arizona than it is in Georgia. Your southern Republican man, is maybe a unique breed. But a lot of these Arizona types are older voters. People that remember the old Republican Party, they're sunbirds, they're people that moved from other parts of the country. So she's doing stronger here. And I think it also brings her into alignment with something that we've seen in the Senate race, where Carrie Lake is running again against Ruben Gallego, the Democratic House rep. Ruben's had a big lead all year. And so the question is, are there really that many people that were going to be Ruben Gallego Trump voters? And the answer was kind of yes, right? Like there were some. Kamala is clawing many of those people back. I think the best news in this poll clearly is Arizona. Well, staying out in the West, Nevada has a little bit of a different demographic breakdown. A lot more working class folks in Nevada, a lot more people without college degrees. This is where Trump has been overperforming. And there is a little bit less of that kind of never Trumpish Republican tradition there in Nevada than you have in Arizona with McCain's, with the Jeff Flakes. That type of voter, they exist in Nevada. Hopefully some of you are watching, but they just don't exist at the same scale. So I've been nervous about Nevada. It's not surprising to me that this poll showed her struggling there as compared to Arizona. But as I said, it has the least electoral votes of the 7 swing states. Now, you go over to the Southeast. This is the more interesting one. She's running 6 points better in North Carolina than she is in Georgia. That's strange. Now, Georgia has been a little bit more to the left than North Carolina, not much. Biden only lost North Carolina by like 1.5 points, and then he barely, I don't think he even won by a full point in Georgia. So it was about 2 points more Democrat last time Georgia was. So for it to flip to 6, that's probably some statistical noise. But there is maybe something that you can learn from this, which is North Carolina does have a higher percentage of college-educated white voters. You have the Research Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, Winston, Charlotte. So you have a higher percentage of college educated, more cities than you have in Georgia. So you have a higher percentage of college educated white folks where Harris is overperforming. So that could be part of this. And I think that North Carolina, you also have the governor's race there, where you have this insane Mark Robinson running as for governor, this MAGA, crazy anti-Semite, ludicrous candidate to be the governor, frankly, running in North Carolina, versus Georgia, where you still have some like traditional Republicans there with Brian Kemp in the governor's seat, Brad Raffensperger, etc. So potentially statistical noise, but something to watch, I think, as more polls come out as the year goes on. Georgia's the worst number, but it was been the worst for Biden all year. So she's improving with black voters. I think she's going to have to get that number up above. I mentioned the top 84. If you want to win Georgia, she's going to have to do better. So like she's going to have to continue to grow among black voters. I think that that's very possible. There could be some lagging indicators here, right? Like sometimes, particularly for folks that are like the least engaged in politics, it takes a little longer to be like, okay, now I'm going to come around for Kamala. That could be happening in Georgia. And then I think you got to reach out to these Brian Kemp, Nikki Haley voters, and they've been a little stubborn. So that's going to be our job here at the Bulwark and my colleagues at Republican Voters Against Trump to try to kind of bring some of those folks back along. They over-index in Georgia, right? Like there's a ton of these pretty not moderate Republicans, right? Like myself, I was a pretty moderate Republican, so this was an easier jump for me to support Biden-Harris. Georgia has a lot of people that are like pretty conservative, good old boy Republicans, but still don't like Trump, right? And so winning those people over for Harris, I think it's going to be a little bit of a bigger lift than it was for Biden in 2020. And I think that could explain why Georgia is lagging. So there you go. That's the update from the Sun Belt. Directionally good news. If you look at all 7 states together, Nate Cohn would be mad at me for doing this because this is not really what you're supposed to do. It's not predictive, but if it were, it would mean a Harris win in North Carolina, Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That would be a pretty comfortable electoral vote victory. So that would get her to about 297 electoral votes. Hard to complain about that. We'll keep monitoring over the weekend. Obviously, she's got the convention next week, which could lead to a little bit more of a bounce. I think it seems to me like there's a little bit more meat on the bone here for her to potentially pick up. And then you get into a fall campaign where anything could happen. So thank you for watching. Subscribe to the feed. We'll see you soon. Peace. Hey, if you like this video and our content, I'd love for you to become a Bulwark Plus subscriber. You get access to bonus podcasts, secret podcasts, and newsletters we put out every day, plus some behind-the-scenes takes that I don't always post on this feed. In addition, you can become part of the Bulwark community. Come over to our Substack and comment and meet other like-minded people. We'd love to have you. Starting today, you can get a free trial at thebulwark.com/free trial. The link is right here on the screen and below in the description. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Come on and give it a free try today.